Hey everyone, welcome to our video about the nitrogen cycle. Take a deep breath in. Wow, did you know that 73% of what you just breathed in is nitrogen gas? Now, that might come as a surprise because a lot of times as humans, we think that most of what we breathe in is oxygen because that's what we need to do our cellular respiration. But 73% of our atmosphere, even over a long period of time, has almost always been nitrogen. Nitrogen's really important for living things, and it's kind of something that's overlooked. Like you might be less familiar with the nitrogen cycle than you were with the water cycle and the carbon cycle. But the main features of the nitrogen cycle are that nitrogen can be released into our atmosphere and then brought back into our earth as a solid or liquid. And something that's really important that you're going to notice at almost every stage of nitrogen, either moving into the ground or into the atmosphere, is going to be bacteria. So, bacteria helps out a lot with the nitrogen cycle, and you can see that there. So, why is nitrogen so important? Who cares about nitrogen? Well, nitrogen's needed to make a lot of different things in your body, especially your DNA, your nucleic acids, and the proteins that are made out of amino acids. So, take a look at these. These are just your four main nucleic acids A, T, G, and C: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. And what you can see here is that they have a lot of little N's, and that little N is a chemical symbol for the element nitrogen. Without all that nitrogen, you're not going to have adenine, and it's definitely not going to bind to thymine. You're not going to have guanine binding to cytosine, and therefore you wouldn't have your DNA the way you know it, and you also wouldn't be able to make your proteins. So nitrogen's very important to you in your body. It's just something that you might not have thought of as much as water or oxygen or carbon dioxide. How do we get it? Well, we are consumers, so we eat plants and animals that have nitrogen in them. So plant leaves have a lot of nitrogen in them. So if you ate a salad, you actually consume nitrogen. And if you ate an animal, like if you ate a hamburger, that cow probably ate some grass that had some nitrogen in it. So by means of the cow, you would be taking in nitrogen. Nitrogen is also able to be obtained through producers. So, producers get their nitrogen from the soil, from ammonium and nitrates in the soil. If you've ever gone to the Lowe's or somewhere else like that and you started trying to plant a garden, you might see things like contains nitrates on the soil or something like that. The reason you want nitrates is that that's going to give some nutrition for the plants to grow. They need those nutrients. Now, once the plant absorbs the nitrates or ammonium into them, they will grow, and then a consumer might eat them, and that cycles the nitrogen through our world. Bacteria, like I said, plays a key role in nitrogen fixation and denitrification. So you might not have heard of those words before, but nitrogen fixation occurs here. It's basically taking nitrogen gas that's in the atmosphere and turning it into the ammonia and nitrates that plants can absorb from the soil. So nitrogen fixation is when bacteria turns a gas into this solid or liquid nitrate and ammonia that plants can absorb. Denitrification is the opposite. That's when different types of bacteria than the ones we saw before, different types of bacteria take, if there's any extra nitrates or ammonia in the ground, they'll take those extra nitrates and ammonia and they will denitrify them. And by doing that, they turn them into a gas that gets released into our atmosphere. And so nitrogen cycles between the atmosphere and the ground through a process of nitrogen fixation, followed by denitrification, and then nitrogen fixation, and then denitrification over and over and over again for millions and millions of years. What could happen if there aren't enough nutrients in the soil and you're trying to grow plants? Think about that. If you're trying to grow a plant and you don't have enough nitrogen or phosphorus or sulfur or any other nutrient, you have a scenario where you have a limiting nutrient. The nutrient is scarce, and so that completely can stop or slow the cycle, like the nitrogen cycle, and therefore causes your plant not to grow. So what you can find here is that if you have enough nitrogen and phosphorus, your plant's going to grow very big. But if you don't have enough nitrogen and phosphorus, your plant will remain fairly small. So if you're gardening and your plants are all small and you're like, why are they so small? Consider being careful with this, but adding possibly a little bit of nitrates or ammonia to the soil to help them grow. They might be experiencing a limiting nutrient situation where there's not enough nitrogen or phosphorus. On the flip side of that, and this is why I said be careful, you can have too many nutrients. So think about a time when you may have ever gone by a pond on a golf course, or by just like even the duck pond in Salem can experience this sometimes. If you add a limiting nutrient like nitrogen really quickly to an ecosystem, there actually is going to end up being more nitrogen than any producer is able to take care of in a quick amount of time. And when there's too much nitrogen, what we end up with is the plants do start to grow, but so does algae. And you get a layer of algae in a body of water. Now, that's pretty bad for other living things, because when that algae bogs up the water, the sun isn't able to pass through the water into the plants that are in the bottom of that pond or lake. And therefore, it kind of blocks things like the carbon cycle with photosynthesis going on. So, too much nutrients added too quickly can cause a big problem, because algae blooms can happen, and that's going to block sunlight for other living things. Think about that if you've ever seen green water at the beach, like too much algae in the water, or if you've gone to the duck pond or some other water, maybe near a golf course, where humans may have added too much fertilizer to their crops and the rain came and washed it down into the pond. Now you have a problem with too much algae. And that's why a lot of times humans will try to use alternative ways to get their crops to grow rather than adding so much fertilizer, because you can see it does end up causing pretty serious problems for the waterways around it. Thank you so much for listening.